Anya was born into a well-off middle-class family. Her parents, a textile entrepreneur and an interior designer, were always busy with their work. Since childhood, Anya had been accustomed to spending time alone in their large house, accompanied only by her nanny or the stacks of storybooks she read repeatedly. Her parents were not cruel, but they were not truly present for her either. Their relationship felt more like an obligation than genuine affection. She rarely received hugs or sweet words, only expensive gifts as substitutes for attention. Porcelain dolls, a grand dollhouse, and a neatly arranged collection of storybooks on the mahogany shelves in her room. But none of those things could replace human warmth. When she was 17, her life changed drastically. Both of her parents died in a car accident. Overnight, she lost the only family she had. She inherited a small apartment on the outskirts of the city and enough money to survive. But money could not erase the emptiness that gnawed at her. Anya had always felt that something was missing in her life. She often woke up in the middle of the night, feeling as if someone was watching her. Her home felt too quiet, too empty, like there was a space meant to be filled by something, but she didn't know what. She tried to fill that emptiness by reading books, watching movies, and writing in her journal. But as time passed, the loneliness only grew stronger, as if something inside her was calling out to something she could not understand. Rina was the complete opposite of Anya in almost every way. She came from a modest but warm family. Her father worked as an electrical technician, while her mother was a homemaker who also ran a small catering business. Rina grew up surrounded by love. She had two younger brothers who were always running around the house, and their family dinner table was always filled with lively conversations. She was cheerful, energetic, and couldn't stay still. When she entered high school, she immediately caught people's attention with her friendly and helpful personality. She joined various extracurricular activities, choir, photography club, and even tried theater before realizing she preferred being behind the camera rather than on stage. But one person intrigued her, Anya. Anya was the quiet girl who always sat in the corner of the classroom, rarely speaking unless spoken to, preferring to stare out the window rather than join conversations. Many at school thought Anya was strange, but Rina was curious. One day, she deliberately sat beside Anya during lunch break and started talking to her. Anya only responded with short answers, seeming reluctant to engage in conversation. But Rina didn't give up. She kept trying to befriend Anya, inviting her to lunch, sending messages even when they were rarely replied to, and even secretly leaving snacks in Anya's desk drawer with little notes that read, "Make sure to eat well." It took months before Anya finally started opening up little by little. They began spending more time together. Rina would visit Anya's house after school, bringing new movies for them to watch. She often took Anya out, urging her to try street food or simply stroll through the park in the afternoon. Rina was the only person who truly managed to enter Anya's world. When Anya's parents passed away, Rina was the first one there for her. She didn't say much. She simply sat beside Anya, held her hand tightly, and let her cry without saying a word. From that moment, Rina silently promised herself that she would never leave Anya alone. But after they graduated from high school and began their own separate lives, Rina started noticing worrying changes in Anya. Anya became increasingly withdrawn and harder to reach. She no longer responded to messages as quickly as before and often avoided meeting up. And when Rina finally convinced her to go out, she looked paler and more lifeless. "Is something going on?" Rina asked one night as they ate together in a small restaurant. Anya gave a faint smile. "I just haven't been sleeping well." But Rina knew it was more than just lack of sleep. A few weeks later, she decided to visit Anya's apartment, unannounced, and what she saw was something she never expected. Anya was sitting on the floor, facing a slightly open wardrobe. Her eyes were empty, as if staring at something no one else could see. "Anya?" Rina called softly. But Anya didn't react. When Rina touched her shoulder, Anya suddenly jolted in surprise. "Oh, you startled me," she said with a small laugh, but her voice was weak. "What were you doing?" Rina asked, still feeling uneasy. Anya was silent for a moment before answering softly, "Sometimes I feel like I'm not alone here." A chill ran down Rina's spine. She tried to convince herself it was just Anya's imagination from being alone too long. But deep down, she felt something was terribly wrong. And she didn't know that the emptiness that had always haunted Anya had finally found something to fill it, something that should not be there. That night was as silent and dark as the ones before. A gentle breeze slipped through the window cracks, causing Anya's bedroom curtains to flutter softly. The clock on the wall ticked in a monotonous rhythm, almost soothing. Anya buried herself under the blanket, trying to ignore the faint whispers coming from inside her old wooden wardrobe. "I know you can hear me." She squeezed her eyes shut, frozen in bed. This was the fourth night she had heard the whispering. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, perhaps the wood expanding or fabric shifting inside the wardrobe. But as time passed, the voice grew clearer, more real. The night before, she had even heard soft laughter. Laughter that sounded eerily like her own. Unable to take it anymore, the next day, Anya decided to prove that it was all in her head. She placed a voice recorder inside the wardrobe before going to bed. If there was truly a sound, she wanted proof. When morning came, Anya woke up with a sense of unease. The sun was shining into her room, yet an odd chill still lingered in the air. She quickly grabbed the recorder and pressed play. At first, there was nothing unusual, just soft breathing and the occasional rustling of sheets. But midway through the recording, something made her blood run cold. A whisper. "Anya, are you still there?" She held her breath. It was her own voice, but she had never said those words. Then another voice followed, a deeper, heavier voice. "I'm here, behind you." Anya reflexively turned around, her eyes landing on the wooden wardrobe in the corner of her room. The door was slightly open. Her heart pounding, she slowly stood up and approached the wardrobe. Her hands trembled as she reached for the handle and pulled the door wider. Inside, her clothes hung neatly. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing seemed wrong. Until she saw it. A small doll. A worn-out doll with large black button eyes and a wide, crudely stitched smile. Its hair was made of tangled reddish-brown thread. Anya frowned. She had never owned this doll. Carefully, she picked it up and lifted it closer to her face. Nothing seemed unusual, until she noticed something on the back of the doll. Words. Sewn with red thread into the fabric of the doll's back was a message. "Don't let me go." A shiver ran down Anya's spine. She quickly threw the doll onto the floor. But as she stepped back, she heard something. A small, raspy giggle, coming from the doll. And before she could move, the doll's head turned on its own. With the sound of fabric shifting, it stared directly at her and whispered, "Why did you throw me away, Anya?" Anya screamed and ran out of the room, leaving the wardrobe door wide open. She didn't care what happened. She was never touching that doll again. But that night, as she tried to sleep on the living room sofa, she felt something cold and soft against her hand. When she opened her eyes, the doll was beside her, and on its back, a new stitch had appeared. "Thank you for taking me out." Anya couldn't breathe. Her body was stiff, cold sweat trickling down her temple. She flung the doll across the room, then leapt off the sofa and switched on every light. Her breathing was ragged. This was impossible. There was no way the doll could move on its own. But when she looked at the spot where the doll had landed, it was gone. With shaking hands, she grabbed her phone and called her best friend. "Rina, please come to my house, right now." Rina arrived in less than 10 minutes, her face filled with confusion as she saw the terror in Anya's eyes. "What's going on?" Rina asked. Anya took a deep breath and told her everything. The whispers from the wardrobe, the voice recording, the doll. Rina fell silent for a moment before saying, "We have to get rid of it." Reluctantly, Anya led Rina back to her bedroom. When they entered, the wardrobe was even more open than before, and the doll was sitting on the bed, waiting for them. They screamed in unison. With sheer determination, Rina grabbed the doll and wrapped it in a cloth before shoving it into a black plastic bag. "We're throwing it into the river," she declared. They rushed to a small river on the outskirts of town. Without hesitation, they hurled the bag into the water. The plastic sank slowly, disappearing into the dark current. They exchanged glances, trying to convince themselves that it was finally over. But that night, as Anya was about to sleep, the sound came from inside her wardrobe. Trembling, she backed away. And then the whisper returned. "Anya, why did you throw me away?" Her heart nearly stopped. She turned toward her bed. The doll was there, and this time the stitches on its back had multiplied, as if someone had embroidered new words in deep red thread. You can't get rid of me. Now I will never let you go. I don't know what to do, Anya whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Rina, I'm scared. Rina was silent for a moment before speaking. Anya, that doll might not be an ordinary doll. There could be something inside it. Anya bit her lip, her mind racing. She recalled reading about cursed objects, things inhabited by evil spirits. Could this doll be one of them? But why had it chosen her? Rina rushed to Anya's house, bringing a handful of salt and holy water from her grandmother's home. We have to burn it, she said firmly. They carried the doll to the backyard. Rina poured gasoline over it and tossed a lit match. Flames erupted. They watched in horror as the doll began to burn, but something was terribly wrong. The doll did not melt. Instead, it moved. The fire engulfed its body, yet it kept smiling. Then, from its crudely stitched mouth, a small voice echoed, "Did you really think I could be destroyed so easily?" The flames suddenly extinguished on their own, as if something had swallowed them whole. The doll remained, partially charred, but its black button eyes still stared at them, sharp, knowing. Rina stepped back, pale with fear, while Anya felt something crawling beneath her skin like hundreds of tiny needles piercing from within. Then her chest tightened. She struggled to breathe. Slowly, she realized something horrifying. The red thread from the doll was now spreading onto her hand, as if sewing her to it. Anya screamed, trying to pull the thread away, but it felt fused to her skin, like veins. Anya, your hand. Rina's voice trembled. Anya looked down and staggered back. Her fingers were changing, her skin was turning rough like aged fabric, and in her head the doll's voice whispered, I've been waiting for you, Anya. Now, we'll always be together. Rina grabbed Anya's hand, trying to pull her back, but Anya stumbled. She felt herself shrinking. The world around her spun, her vision darkened, and when she opened her eyes again, she couldn't move. Rina stood before her, crying, holding a doll that now looked exactly like Anya. And on the ground was a new doll, small, with large black button eyes and a wide, crudely stitched smile. Anya tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to breathe, but she had no lungs. She tried to run, but she had no legs. Her body was stitched together with red thread. She couldn't move, but she could see, she could hear, and worst of all, she could feel. Something was dragging her soul into the darkness. In front of her, Rina remained frozen, staring at the doll that now resembled Anya. It had Anya's eyes, Anya's hair, even Anya's smile, but it wasn't her. Rina, trembling, picked up the real doll, the one with black button eyes and a stitched smile. Her fingers shook. Anya? She whispered, hoping her friend was still there, but there was no answer, only soft, eerie laughter. I'm right here. Slowly, the Anya-like doll lifted its hand. Its smile widened, too wide for a human face. Anya? Rina's voice wavered. The doll jerked its head to the side in a broken motion and laughed. A quiet, raspy giggle. It wasn't Anya's voice anymore. Rina stepped back, breathing hard. What happened to you? The doll stood up. Its joints cracked like old wood as it moved. Then, a sickening sound. Its jaw unhinged, far too wide. And from within its mouth, a long red thread unraveled, floating in the air, reaching toward Rina. Rina screamed and sprinted toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. She grabbed the handle, twisting it with all her strength. It wouldn't budge. Meanwhile, the red thread inched closer and closer. Tears streamed down Rina's face. Anya, please, don't do this. The doll chuckled softly. But I'm lonely, Rina. The red thread touched her skin. Instantly, it burned. She shrieked as the thread burrowed beneath her flesh, weaving itself into her skin. It stitched her muscles, her veins, her bones. Her entire body became stiff, like a wooden puppet. Rina collapsed to her knees, sobbing. She tried to resist, but her body was no longer hers. Her head locked into place, her lips curved into a smile she didn't want. And before her consciousness faded completely, she saw her reflection. She wasn't human anymore. She had become a doll. And behind her, the Anya-like doll whispered, Now, we'll always be together, Rina. The lights flickered, then went out. The room fell into silence, except for a single chilling sound. Laughter.